I'd like to thank Eddie Lambert for supplying this photo. Well, Grievenhagen flew his last patrol with the unit on 11 August of 1917. He was being transferred to become a trainer of future fighter pilots at Jasta School No. 2. The High Command decided to bring an outsider in to lead the unit. And what an outsider. Rudolph Berthold was already a living legend in the German Air Service. He'd flown at the front since the outbreak of the war. He already had Corps de Mérite and 11 victories. He had received his first wound in his left hand in February 1916. In April of that same year, he crashed in a false Heimdecker and sustained a skull fracture, concussion, a broken pelvis, a broken right thigh, and a broken nose. Everyone said he would never fly again, but they didn't know Berthold. He would return to command Jasta 14, and he turned it into a cracked unit through his strict training and leadership by example. He was a demanding leader. He did not know the meaning of compromise, but he never required anything of his men that he didn't demand of himself. This quote is typical. He's talking about his men at Jasta 14. And this is a nice little chatty letter to his family. They are thankful for the perfection of their training, even if I am ruthlessly strict, and I myself know no mercy as regards duty. Practice takes place in all kinds of weather. I am mercilessly strict. Well, in April of 1917, he was wounded a third time when his right shin was shot through. He wrote another letter. It's rather striking that the first time I was wounded, it was in my left hand. Then came the upper left thigh, and now my right leg. Now only my right arm is missing a wound. But one really shouldn't think about this, otherwise one will turn into a coward. Well, he was thrilled to be posted to Flanders. He hated to be leaving Jasta 14, but he managed to bring 3 of his favorite pilots with him. And he also instituted a very colorful and uniform new color scheme, which consisted of dark blue fuselages and tails, and often the upper surfaces of the top wing, and all set off by a bright red nose. This is a fairly rare photograph of Berthold's own Albatros D3 bearing his famous winged sword emblem. And the Albatros D5 on top was flown by the 26th Victory Ace Harald Alfar, and it's decorated with his familiar comet emblem. And remember the airplane on the bottom, that with the star was flown by Otto Schober, who achieved 1 victory. All right, what's that saying? Does life imitate art, or is it the other way around? Well, this is a painting by our own Jim Dietz, of course. He's familiar to many of you. Shows a devilishly handsome German pilot recently decorated with the Corps de Mérite. And of course, the winged arrow was based on the insignia of Joseph Staffel, Belgians, one of the best aces of Jasta 18. Here he is posing with this aircraft, with his favorite flight jacket, which was lined with tiger skin. The guy had style. And he was a favorite protege of Berthold, who would go on to great glory and success and gain 35 victories. Well, the airmen of Jasta 18 weren't the only skilled and proficient fighter pilots on the Flanders front. The RFC had men of high caliber as well. In particular, of course, the famous 56th Squadron, which was right across the line. And in particular, Flight Lieutenant Gerald Maxwell, who took over A flight after Ball's death, would end the war with 26 victories. He encountered Jasta 18 on many occasions. On 18th of August, he wounded Lieutenant Weinschenk of the Jasta. And his flight would encounter the Jasta repeatedly, and he would make several more claims against the unit. Remember that name, Gerald Maxwell. By September of 1917, Berthold had trained his eager young pilots to the peak of readiness. And this month, September 1917, would be their best month. They averaged basically a victory every day, from the 4th to the 30th of September. Berthold himself achieved 15 of these, including his 25th, quite a landmark, which was marked with this photo. This floral wreath with the number inscribed on it, that kind of looks familiar to a lot of you. He would go on to instill this as a practice when he commanded Jagdgeschwader 2. And 7 other pilots in the unit contributed to that total of victories without a single casualty during the month. And this magnificent painting by Russell Smith depicts the squadron's attack on 57 Squadron DH-4s on the 2nd of October, when the squadron lost 3 DH-4s to Jasta 18 in the afternoon of October 2nd. Berthold destroyed one of the DH-4s, and newcomer Walter Staffel got another one. That's Alphar's P5 right there. You can recognize some of the others. Richard Runge brought down this particular DH-4 and was photographed with it. It was his 8th victory on that day. The pilot, Lieutenant Crane, was prisoner, but his observer, Lieutenant English, was killed. And in spite of his glasses, Runge was a fierce and determined fighter ace, who unfortunately would be shot down in flames a little over a month afterwards. Well, here they are. To me, this photograph personifies panache and confidence. This is the group at the height of their success at the beginning of October 1917. And this is Strela, and Josef Welchens, and Berthold, and Harold Alfart, Otto Schulter, and Hugo Schaefer, Richard Runge, the guy with the glasses, and Turk, and Walter Dingle, and Arthur Rahn. And if you've seen the Fokker triplane in the United States Air Force Museum, it's patterned after his aircraft. And the total victory score of this group was right at 150. You add them all up. Perhaps even more amazing, all but 2 would survive the war. Well, on the 2nd of October, just a few days after that photo was taken, actually on the 10th of October, that photo was taken on the 2nd of October. On the 10th of October, destiny caught up with Berthold. Once again, about 6 in the evening, Jasta 18 became embroiled in a big brawl with their old enemies, the SE-5As of 8th Flight, 56 Squadron, the Bristol fighters of 22 Squadron. Once again, Gerald Maxwell was in the mix. In his combat report, he wrote, "I got onto one enemy aircraft's tail and fired a drum of Lewis and about 100 rounds of Vickers at very close range. The enemy aircraft went down steeply and I lost sight of it." The pilot of that enemy aircraft was Rudolph Berthold. This may have been the aircraft. This is Pfalz D3, not a D3A, which he flew for a very short time, apparently, before he was shot down. And Berthold was shot in the right humerus of his right arm. The humerus was just shattered. He just managed to land his crippled machine back at his airfield in spite of half-severed ailerons, and he passed out from blood loss just as he landed. He was taken to the Victoria Military Hospital in Berlin, where his sister was a nurse. He was spared amputation of his right arm only by skilled surgery, but he would never regain full use of it. Command of the squadron passed to Oberleutnant Turk, and the fierce combat over the Flanders skies continued. In particular, on the 26th of October, this was a day when rain and fog should have stopped everyone on either side from flying. However, at 28th Squadron across the lines, there was a brash and aggressive Canadian flight commander named William George Billy Barker, a name which will be familiar to all of you. Exactly 1 year and a day after this, Barker would take part in his famous clash against heavy odds, which would earn him the Victoria Cross in his 50th victory. On this soggy October day, however, Barker had 1 victory, but he was very aggressive. He was determined to prove that his appointment as a flight commander in this new squadron was merited. He planned an aerodrome raid on Maraba, where he heard that the Richthofen Circus was based. He would lead 3 other volunteers, including Lieutenant Jones, Fenton, and most notably, Second Lieutenant Hardat Singh Malik, the Flying Sikh. He was the only Sikh in the Royal Flying Corps, and he had encountered quite a bit of prejudice. He had to have a special flying cap made that would fit over his turban. As I said, he encountered a great deal of prejudice, but Barker liked him and called him the Indian Prince. Malik later called this mission a most foolhardy operation, but he eagerly took part as 4 camels struggled to lift off from the soggy airfield. Soon Fenton and Jones became lost in the mist, but Malek stayed glued on Barker's tail. At almost the same time, 4 highly experienced Jasta 18 veterans took off from Harleby Pit into what Strela called a strong, showery southwest wind. And they included our Turan, who's there, and Strela and Otto Schober, all of them very experienced, and Johannes Klein, who would later go on to achieve 16 victories. At about 1,200 meters, the Albatross pilots blundered through the rain under the camels of Barker and Malek. Strela wrote that this combat was the hottest and most exciting in his career, and Barker would later say much the same thing. Strela wrote, "We fired at 2 enemy single-seaters. One, who was Malek, by the way, the Indian, dived to fire at targets on the ground, and I went after him. The other was engaged by Klein and Schober. Strela hung on to Malek's camel like a terrier." And then he continued to write, "In a tough dogfight lasting more than 15 minutes, sometimes only a few feet off the ground, I fought the enemy scout, but sadly I had to break off because my guns were jammed. Apart from the skilled pilot, his machine was faster and more maneuverable than mine, to which we must be added the low-altitude showers and rain. But for this I might have got it. For the whole of the fight, I used full throttle. 3 times we were down to ground level." And this is the Albatross Strela was flying, marked with his personal battle axe insignia. Strela did not claim a victory, but in fact he had wounded his opponent. Malek wrote, "I was very soon hit by a German pilot who dived on me and shot me through my right leg. I was disabled because my petrol tank linked, my tank was finished, and I had nothing but the gravity tank. With the gravity tank you couldn't climb, and if you couldn't climb you couldn't fight. The German fighter followed me because all I could do was get as low as possible and get back home. He shot all he had at me, point blank, coming as close as possible. Finally I got down, and the next thing I remember was being in a stretcher and being taken to the casualty clearing station. Later on, my plane was found to have over 400 bullet marks on it." Seems a bit of an exaggeration. Barker, meanwhile, had tangled with Schober and Klein. Barker wrote, "I attacked one with a red nose. We fought for 15 minutes, and he flew very well. We tried every stunt, and at last, by doing a roll, I got both guns on him at 20 yards and shot him down in flames. I was attacked by another, and after 10 minutes, fighting almost on the ground, I got my guns on him, and down he went." Well, Barker had killed Otto Schober. He had claimed another Albatross, but despite his claim, Johannes Klein escaped unharmed. Both Barker and Malek were convinced that they had met the Red Baron's flying circus and told this story many times in later years, but they had encountered Jasta 18. Strela would leave soon after this to command Jasta 57, so he leaves our story at this point. Well,